We have Councillor Cook. We have Kevin Charette, committee member. Peter Somsich, committee member. Ben D'Antonio, committee member. Tom Rooney, committee member, is absent, as is Allison Tanner. Tonight, we've got a few decisions to make, and we just want to share information. We have the energy aggregation plan largely written. Our goals section is done. I've also added a little history section as one of the appendices. Here's what's next with that. Unless there are changes that you would like to see us make, we'll send the red line version back to the Community Power Coalition, which they've asked us to do. They actually have some sections that they've shortened, which is good. And we were also going to give it to the city legal department so they can review it. And then it'll come back to us, and we can then share it with the city council as a proposed energy aggregation plan, and tell the city council we're then going to hold public hearings to get citizen input. The other things we want to talk about tonight, the community survey, which in our engagement plan, which Stephanie wrote for us, is slated for December. So we wanted to talk about implementing that. I don't think we have to have everything figured out tonight. That'd be nice if we could. We could have a small working group get together on that if necessary, just for logistics. And then last meeting, we asked Ben to look at the net metering portion of the aggregation plan. And he's going to educate us a little bit on that. I think there's some policy questions for us there. And we'll get updated on the new documents from Community Power Coalition, the risk management document, and the cost sharing plan. It's very early in the game for those, so we don't have to go into them in too great a detail. But we just want everybody to be aware of those. And then we'll take a look at our action steps for December. So let's turn to the survey. We've got the draft of that ready to go. And we worked that over a fair amount at the last meeting. And I'll raise my hand and say I think it's good to go. And if we want to move ahead and get it done in December, I would propose to us that we send a postcard out to all the households with a QR code and a link. And that would give us very broad reach. We had talked about an op-ed piece prior to that postcard mailing going out, which I'd be happy to write. And then that survey would come back, and I think that survey, of course, generates interest in what was the response, what did people say. That gives us a hook for a January community forum on the whole topic, which would set us up nicely for the public hearings. I did ask Henry Herden, and do the public hearings have to be done by the city council, or can they be done by us? And he said, well, it differs town to town, but generally it's been the energy committees that have been doing the public hearings. I think that's good. The more public hearings you add to city council nights, the more you get towards midnight. So if we could get the public input on this as the only topic of the night, I think that that helps us. So I also talked to city manager and deputy city manager about doing the postcard mailing. We'd want 3 bids for that, and they think that they could get that turned around in a week or 2. I looked at costing, and it looks like we'd be in the range of either $5,000 or $5,200 for a solo postcard, or there's a shared mail package that goes out to every home with your market basket flyers and everything else. And the card on top of that is a good vehicle, and that's about $2,500. Then the question would be, what's our call to action? What are we asking people to do? So we can work on that, but I'll pass around just some simple copy as a starting place. I don't think we have to do that tonight. I think we could have a work session, a coalition of the willing who wanted to work on postcard copy, but
Have some more of that, John?
yeah. Oops. Here.
Thank you, Peter.
Is it too late to get into the water bill for early December?
That actually costs more,
Does it? Okay.
but
We don't have I like the postcard idea,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, the water bill can only take an 8.5 by 11 sheet.
Yeah, exactly.
right.
But I do think because I'm on the city laptop, it seems to me that when the stormwater folks just did the postcard mailing to all of the water bill list, it was a lot less money. So I need to look at that
Okay.
number and send it to you.
Yeah, I think that's some due diligence we need to do on the staff side is, what are the options?
And Southport did that mailing. They printed the postcard, did the mailing, and
Right. Southport is a vendor, Spectrum over in Manchester, which does all of the wonderful political cards that we've been receiving.
they're all in the Bahamas.
That's right. Spectrum's good, Eastern Marketing Services, and so any of those, I think, would be potentials. So I think it's a matter of having some quotes.
Counselor, if you have any additional comments on the survey, or do we want to handle those outside of today's meeting, or can you discuss any of that?
Sure.
You, whatever.
I kind of walked past that, but let's go back and take up the survey. There were elements you wanted to change?
No, well, just a couple things, and I had passed along a note to you, Stephanie, I don't know if you saw it. Just, it was minor, we referenced CPCNH in one of the
I did
things.
see that.
We
and
didn't, we've never really defined it in the survey, so that
okay.
needs some language maybe in the intro of the survey. Because in one of the questions, we say, we just reference CPCNH and.
Right, yeah, and the change I made was for Portsmouth Community Power, and it,
Yeah, it says CPCNH will offer blah, blah, blah. And
Right.
we might want to just add a sentence or two in the intro section to define what that is and that we've signed up some language.
somewhere right here in the Community Power is coming to, Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire is, or the Portsmouth Committee is working with the Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire on this initiative.
And then
And
maybe,
maybe just not,
then a sentence of what
yeah.
CPCNH is. Yeah.
Okay.
Just some, because if we're going to reference it. we need to-
Yes, no, that's good, that's a good change. I also noticed that in the copy, we became the Community Power Committee as opposed to our current name.
Yeah, and I only did that because that came up in one of the prior meetings, specifically talking about the EAP, where we are the Portsmouth Community Power, not Portsmouth Energy Advisory Committee. So it's whether the survey is being sent by this committee or by the Portsmouth Community Power Initiative, or if it's worth making that distinction.
I think it'd be good to have our committee name just because that's where all our information is on the city website.
Right.
And as yet, there isn't a Community Power Committee, but
Okay.
Ben.
Question about the city website. Is subdomain auto-forwarding something that the city engages in?
Not usually. We try to keep all of the framework together. But what were you,
Like a common address would be www.cityofportsmouth.com.
right?
And if you swapped out the www for community power, communitypower.cityofportsmouth.com could auto-forward to whatever URL you want.
Right.
And if you've got a
I
path that fits your normal directory structure,
I
great.
think there may be an example of that that's just come up recently. So let me ask our IT folks.
Just because it's simple, catchy, and
Yeah.
it's everything.
Because we do have the problem that our web pages have URLs that are like this.
They're enormous. No
Yep,
one remembers
and
them.
they're not always plain English.
And on this one, Sophie, I don't know if it's Portsmouth Community Power is working with, but is it like the city of Portsmouth has joined
Yeah,
the Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire?
Yep.
that's a little more factually accurate, yeah.
And then you can put the language around
Right.
the CPCNHs.
And remember, the beauty of the survey is it will be online, so the copy can be changed right up until
Yeah.
the mail drop.
Cool. Yeah, you could put some just like, well, the language around pooling
Mhm.
the needs for the cities and towns in New Hampshire, the members, whatever. Yeah, we have language that kind of defines what CPCNH is.
Right.
And then I just had one question, one of these questions kind of, to me, the one that says programs to buy power off-peak, at off-peak rates and use battery storage. So when it kind of links the two together, and it's, I mean, there's a near-term opportunity that we could have more in the way of time-of-use rates, having nothing to do with
Right.
battery storage. So I was just suggesting that there be maybe a question added that precedes the one about battery storage that says, the ability to have lower off-peak time-of-use rates so electricity consumption can be shifted to less costly times of day. That's like one question. How interested would you be in doing that, just shifting your consumption? Then it could be followed by this question around and the use of battery storage. Because battery storage it's more futuristic.
Didn't you send us an email with some of that?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
So I just was wondering if that was
Did you-
something we wanted to
Did you
entertain.
incorporate that? I know you've been good about.
Kevin,
That-
we don't have
that
interval
I-
meters yet, right?
What's that?
We don't have interval meters yet.
No, we don't.
We don't have interval meters. Okay.
Right, that would
This is
require having new meters to do that, if you want time of use.
So the question's really kind of just trying to get a sense of our
Is there an interest in
preferences? Interest?
pursuing that?
Well, but-
I guess it's a little bit of a tease, right?
Maybe it's also a little bit too technical to start off with, that if you ask people, would you like to explore rates that are related to usage, high usage, low usage, you know, is that some, but see, when you ask people that, they don't know, well, what do I have to do to do
Yeah,
that?
what do I-
I have
to
to wash
enable it, right.
my dishes at nighttime, or no laundry during the day, or, I mean, you know, now you're getting really intimate into their lives, and we don't even know if we can handle that, because we don't have currently meters that can separate different time intervals and say, okay, there's four
Right.
different rates in a 24-hour cycle, you know, we don't have
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
So maybe we should.
So this
try to-
question, even as written then, is a little
Yeah, and I think
kludgy.
even the batteries
It
are a
says-
little too complicated, you know?
I mean, there
Do
is
you
no-
want to store energy? Yeah, sure, I'm going to store energy. What, do I have to have a big battery in my yard, or, you know, people just get confused.
I didn't know where this question came from.
Who pays for it?
But if we had it, I thought more generic question just around it would be people be
Yeah.
interested in time of use rates to move their consumption, like, you know, drying your clothes at a 9 o'clock at night versus
See,
during the
when
day.
you say time of use, people don't know what that is.
So this is
Ordinary
one of the,
Yeah.
one of the options of things that you'd be interested in. And I'm thinking, because I think Allison also said the battery storage, although she may have come up with that. The battery storage is a separate thing that we haven't explained, so I would suggest taking that out. But as one of the items on the list, for example, the ability to increase availability of locally produced renewable energy, maybe it's the ability to buy power at off-peak rates. Is it that simple? Is that what you're trying to get to?
Maybe something
Oh,
like,
really?
would you be willing to explore options to use energy cheaper when it's less in demand, when there's less demand for it? Would you be willing to change your energy consumption according to rates being different at different times of the day, you know, or something like that?
Well, the way I worded it here, and maybe it's still a little
Yeah.
too technical, but the ability to have lower off-peak time of use rates, so electricity consumption, i.e. electric dryer, can be shifted to less costly times a day. But you're pointing out, we
That's
don't have
very-
we don't have the meter
We don't have the
technology.
meters right now, yeah, that's
Yeah.
what it's.
So
So maybe we just
so maybe
take it out.
it's not even time to
Maybe too early.
introduce that.
Yeah,
Yes.
That's
Eliminate
my
that
feeling.
option.
Okay.
And certainly the battery storage, I think, is even more,
yes. I think these are
Futuristic.
almost questions
Only
you
in New
need to-
Hampshire.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we even have the code, the building code is not even updated to accommodate all of that.
Vermont has tons of them.
Yeah,
Battery storage.
yeah, yeah.
California has
Little
tons of
Vermont
it, too.
Yeah.
has tons of them.
at the
Well-
residential level, yeah.
Well, I think maybe these things are things that we should contemplate adding once things are up and running.
Yeah.
Okay? So
can always go
once
back.
people get used to what that means and how it affects my behavior or not, then you can say, you know, we're exploring batteries, we're exploring
Yeah.
different times of day usage.
Yeah.
Would you be willing to be interested in exploring that? And then say, okay, this is what you need to do, or this
Yeah.
is what we would need to do by, like, replacing meters.
Let's cut it out. Let's
Yeah.
just,
So that was the only one, because
Yep.
we might be kind of over-promising there.
Yes,
not-
yeah, I
Not
think
being
so.
able to deliver,
know,
you know. That's it.
I liked it because it was in the future, and
Well,
we're all
yeah.
going to live there someday, but, you know, it's too futuristic.
Okay, so I will add a short description of what the coalition is, and then I think we're
Yeah.
good.
Yep, excellent.
Everybody get a chance to look at that
Yep.
copy? We sort of on the right track directionally?
I think directionally, it's definitely on the right track. I have a question or two.
Yeah.
Here, it's on behalf of their residents. Are we intending to also offer community power to the businesses in Portsmouth?
Yes.
So if we say on behalf of their residents, should we also say and businesses?
Yeah, right.
Right.
Should.
Yep.
Could you give me a
Counselor?
copy of that? I gave one to Kate. I'm wondering if we just, looking at the introductory language for the survey, do we want to just lift that paragraph so it's the same?
I just, I thought I tried to shorten it.
Okay.
In order
So-
to keep it on a postcard.
So here we're saying on behalf of residents, businesses, and municipal accounts, so.
That's fine, yeah.
I spoke with Ben Van Camp at the chamber, and he would be happy to send out a blast
Oh, good.
for us. Stephanie can coordinate. He said, have Stephanie coordinate with him. Okay. So,
Super. We could even, yeah, we could send something like this.
Right.
We're getting a library of materials here.
And do we want that e-blast to be timed with the survey? Because that's to the business community. Do you want to put in the QR code?
Sure. I think so.
Better to get as many participants as not.
Right.
And they may be more of a savvy customer, more
Yeah.
focused on their overhead and more
Yeah, they
interested
may,
in something like this.
they're probably using a third party now.
They should be.
Yeah.
And,
And Counselor, before I forget, just relative to the EAP, there's a section in there that we still need to fill out relative to our load.
Yes.
So before I think we send it to the CPC, I think we need to get our load data from Eversource and fill out that table, because I think
right. Yes.
because
and you-
that kind of gives a nice summary, and I think CPC&H is kind of looking for that as well. So, I mean, we can send it along to Henry, saying that's forthcoming, but that's a kind of an important section that it's not filled out yet.
Right. And you and I talked, we have a deadline, right, to
Yeah,
request
so
that?
as of, I think, this Friday, Peter Pritz can do that second request to get more granular information from Eversource. And then they have, I think, a few weeks to turn that around.
Okay.
But,
So Stephanie, we need to be in touch with Peter to
If
make
that
sure
ends
that.
up lagging, can you let me know and I can bother someone?
Good. We got a guy on the inside.
We've already got the guy who used to do it.
they're working with the utilities now, CPC&H's. Because there's a lot of work kind of leading up. And so all three utilities in the state are now working with CPC&H.
Good, good. So we'll say residents, businesses, and municipal users. And Stefan, you and I can finalize this. I'm sure whichever vendor we work with can make it artistic.
What do we want on the front of the postcard? Do we want the chart, this graphic that we have in the survey? Either the benefits of community power or the what is?
Anybody got good inspirations on that?
Might be able to combine those two. If we're, are you thinking 6x9 or whatever the larger size postcard is? 6x9
Yeah.
sounds right. So we could theoretically, looking at these two graphics on the survey, put the two of them together on the front.
I think I like the benefits better just because I think the graphics are larger, the font might be larger too.
Yeah,
So squeezing too much small font together
right.
is not a good idea, I think.
And
And I think
benefits is
this-
always capturing.
Yeah, benefits, and also I think we cover all the bases there with those icons too. But, you know,
Yeah.
one of the things that might be helpful, if you're gonna put like this on the front of the postcard, is to also include maybe the website for the Energy Advisory Committee, because if people see this and then they're like,
Who's this
what
from?
is this?
yes,
You know,
yes.
it would be helpful for them to be able to
Yes.
look it up.
Well, for that matter, city seal somewhere.
Yeah, as you're saying that, how about the community power logo, since they're both round logos, that on the left, city seal on the right,
Perfect.
website in the middle?
Perfect, yeah.
Well, I'm also a big proponent of having a phone number to call. Because, you know,
Careful what you wish for.
Yeah, what's
yeah, you'd be surprised how few
your
calls
phone
you get. I mean, as a state rep, I can tell you, I put my phone number everywhere. And if I get one call a month, it's a lot. Okay, so what I'm saying is, there are people who either are not that savvy, don't go online too often, and they get this postcard, and it says, you know, if you want more information, you can go to this website, you can go to this link, or you can call this number. And
Let
you
me
know, I
check.
don't care which number we give out, but somebody, there should be some way of contacting a real human being if you want to.
Or an email address to a real human being.
Yeah, email.
Email address, sure,
I think
yeah.
he's going for the lower tech demographic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that when we did the McIntyre survey, we put a phone number on it, and it was busy. So,
Well, if we can get as much interest in this as McIntyre, then we're in good shape.
that's, well,
The bigger challenge would be having somebody on staff who is available to answer
Right,
questions.
yeah.
And could answer those
it
questions.
ended up being the city manager's 2 assistants for the better
Well,
part
it
of
could be
2
just
days.
a number that you call and somebody will get back to you with an answer. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a person that right then and there answers that question. But somebody will get back to that person with an answer. And, you know, we got to look at this as, you know, we're gaining one customer at a time if we explain this to somebody. You know, how often you get to
Right.
interact with that person. Because emails and websites, they're not interactive really. They're just, you know, one-way directional. And you can't have a discussion or a dialogue, or you can't have a follow-up question because, okay, it just says one. If it's not a frequently asked question, it's not a question you're answering.
Yeah, here's my
Yeah.
concern, though, you know, with 12,000 postcards,
Yes.
you know, even 1% is 120 phone calls. Whereas if we did email, I think that's more realistic with staff.
Yeah, well, I'm just thinking, you know, 120, those are 120 people with whom we interact and we get feedback from. You know, if something's confusing for people, and out of the 120, 20 people call us because this is confusing, that's good feedback.
Yeah, I think the challenge would be that we don't have the staffing
So
to
can
handle the
explain.
volume,
Right.
or that understands the program effectively enough. Because Peter Britz can't take all those phone calls,
no,
and Stephanie's not sitting at a desk all day. taking-
Right,
So
and
it's,
Well-
Jessica and, you know, the city.
Yeah.
It could be a member of our committee too,
yeah.
you know?
Yeah, if it was going to be anyone, it would have to be
Right.
Yeah.
somebody who sits on this
Yeah.
committee, I would.
Which, you know, to me argues for email, because then you don't have to respond in real time if you're, you know, getting out of the shower and the phone
Yeah,
rings
yeah,
or
yeah.
something like that, so.
Yeah.
And there's the possibility to phone someone when you get a question on email. I set up the hotline at cityofportsmouth.com email during the pandemic, and we were bracing ourselves for getting a barrage of
Yes.
questions, and we didn't. But that email continues, and every now and then I will get a question about who knows what, which I can either answer or I refer it to the person who can. But I always tell the person who's written either the answer or I've referred that, and please, you know, I will keep on this so you get your answer. And so we could use that email, or we could even, I mean, to Ben's point about the URL, I can ask Alan to set up a PEAC at City of Portsmouth if you want to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be good.
Even if there was a form fill on the PEAs, on the committee's site, like a
Yep.
form you could fill out
Yeah.
if you don't understand and you needed more
Right.
information.
Yeah.
I can
Copy to
definitely
Peter
do
and me
that.
and.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because on several of the DPW project pages, there is if you have a question or concern, just put it here in the the form that's right on that page, so I can do
Yeah.
that tomorrow.
And people will call the city clerk's office and ask. That's what I think usually happens.
yeah.
People call the city clerk's office and said, I got this in the
Sure.
mail, I don't even know what this is.
That'll happen.
And they'll direct them somewhere.
Right.
And in addition to providing the city website or our committee's website, we might want to put the coalition's website on there too, just,
Yeah.
it's just another way, for those that are inquisitive, they'll go out to the CPC&H website and poke around, see what
Right.
see what it's all about, make it easy for them to get there.
So the front of the card, we've got benefits of community power and the logos
And both websites.
on both websites. The back, we've got some copy. And,
And the QR code on the back.
right, right. So then we just have to find out who can do it and when they can do it and how much it'll cost.
Right. I'll get you those numbers on the mailing.
I did,
It says on here too, or you can send us questions. To
that's
who?
through the survey form.
Oh, so there's gonna be,
The survey,
the survey is gonna let you send something. Okay.
Counselor Tabor?
yes.
When you get to the stage where you're writing the op-ed, if you're interested, I did reach out to Julie Gilman in Exeter.
Oh, good.
And they are willing, she's willing to work with you on anything. So it doesn't have to be for this one, but
Yeah.
I will put you in touch with her.
Great.
So I guess they're willing to work with us on some.
Yes, I know her, and I'd be happy to work with her.
Yeah.
That'd be great. Stephanie, these are some counts from
Okay.
Eastern Marketing. I think it's 13,100 addresses if we do businesses and 11,005 if we... So I think, Counselor, the thought was the op-ed could be a double byline, kind of, for the whole seacoast.
Yeah.
Okay.
Something to get more attention, I
Yep.
guess. So I don't know if it's this one that's talking about the survey or if it's another one that you want to do. But now that the election's over, I imagine that she probably has a little more time.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, more on the survey? I think we got our steps in line. I'm going to share a copy with the council just for information purposes, so that they don't hear about a survey to every home that they don't know about. And publicity and engagement, our big item. Do you all remember Stephanie's flow chart here for us? Let's see. In what we have done, we've had 2 interviews and articles in the Herald, and you may have seen Kevin was in New Hampshire Business Review. We did meet with the Sustainability Committee and share ideas with them. Counselor Cook was great. She went to the New Hampshire Saves Button-Up event and spoke for us. There were 24 participants, and
I've actually already heard from one that was thrilled with the event.
good,
Yeah. Made a point of reaching out to me.
nice, nice. In December, we've got community survey and plan the public hearing for January. We had deliverables of the op-ed, press release and calendar listings.
We'll do a press release draft in advance of doing the survey, as
Yeah.
well as
Right.
notifying council.
Great, okay. We had a PIAC work session December 8th listed. Maybe that was to plan the public hearings. Must have been.
yeah, that we have the December 8th on the calendar as this committee meeting.
Okay. All right. So we'll plan on planning at that one. But, you know, most of the items that we've said we're going to do, we've gotten done, so. And then we got a little help from New Hampshire Business Review and a union leader. I mean, CPCNH has been a publicity machine. They've been getting lots of press. So, any other thoughts or questions about our engagement plan? Moving right along.
Council, the public hearings, where would they be held? Is that here in this, in City Hall, or just curious where you?
We can hold them wherever we'd like.
Okay.
The chamber would be great, the city council chamber, because it's set up for it and easy to record. So we'll have to see about that. I suppose we could do it in here as well, depending on this room's functional. Did you have thoughts on where we should?
No, I was just curious what.
Yeah.
Yeah, the larger chamber would be wonderful, I think, depending on the attendance. Yeah.
Right, right. Yeah, once the survey goes out, the storm breaks. And then we follow up with community forum and then the public hearings. That was our plan. But again, the goal is to get to where when people receive notification about Portsmouth Community Power being their default supplier, it's not a surprise. If we can get to that point, then we're going to be okay. So it's more work now, but if we don't do it, it's more work later. The risk management policy and cost sharing, Kevin, did you want to handle that for us, or?
Sure. So there's 4 policies actually that are in flight right now. One is the risk management policy around procurement. One is around financial reserves that the communities will be looking to build up, generated by the rate structures. Then there's a policy around rate setting, and those are all embedded in one document right now. And I think it's been passed around, right?
Yep.
You shared that. And then there's one on the cost sharing, how the cost of CPCNH will get allocated back to the member communities. So that is in flight. And Ascend Analytics, who's the one firm that's doing the procurement portfolio management for CPCNH, they're also developing these policies for CPCNH as well. And they're going through the review process right now, legal review, and counselors shared kind of the schedule out over the next month to continue to review these and draft, to bring them finally before the CPCNH board in December to get approved. There's going to be a couple evening sessions that were in that calendar that member community advisory committees can Zoom into to get updates on the policies and better understand the content. It's particularly important for the Wave 1 communities because their city councils or towns need to sign off on those policies soon. So it's the involvement by the energy advisory committees of the Wave 1 communities. It's almost like so-called mandatory for them to engage over the next few weeks. But for us, it's it's not mandatory, but I think it's helpful for us all to kind of
Mhm.
begin to get steeped in the content of these documents.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah, and if they have it boiled down to a PowerPoint or something, that,
yeah, so the Ascend had offered to, because these documents are, 20, 30, 40 pages, and they're pretty dense. So I think for these kind of public sessions that are being held, they're going to at least have a PowerPoint presentation that gives the general content. But, so I'm on the Risk Management Committee, and that's the committee that's kind of working through this, so I'm a little bit close to it. But it's there's a lot of smart people that are close to this that are working on it. The consultants that are supporting us and Ascend, and legal support for CPCNH and everything, so. So, yeah.
and in terms of what was the parameters for risk and everything, and the cost sharing, I didn't see anything that you haven't told us was coming. I mean, it all seemed to be consistent.
Yeah, so there's a lot of editing going on, and just different eyeballs looking at it. There's
Right.
refinements and edits and et cetera, but,
Right.
And particularly in your space, you might, particularly the power procurement risk management, you'd probably
have
be-
questions.
take a look at it,
You had questions?
I have questions. I'd be interested to read it.
Yeah. So you feel free to pass them along, and we'll, anybody, and we'll kind of get them into the process.
Okay. Counselor?
I just have a question around, clearly development of all these policies, and clearly, once they're developed, we won't be reopening them to negotiate anything in them later. So the second wave, for example, we'll just have to adopt the existing policies. Does it make sense at all to have legal here, look at them now, and provide some input? I just know that the legal department in Portsmouth will want to see them, and I don't
Yeah,
know that they're
no,
gonna wanna
we should.
inherit them.
We should, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanna make sure that we don't put ourselves in a situation where we just have to accept and didn't have any input later.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good, because there really hasn't been discussion specific to local city and town legal departments reviewing. It's just more or less that the local city and town councils, et cetera,
Right.
need to approve them. So I'll ask about that.
Yeah, I think that Portsmouth
You know.
is unusual because we're the city
Yeah.
that's in the group, and
Yeah.
clearly we have a fairly robust legal department.
Yep. Yeah, and Nash was in wave one. Trying to think of any of the other larger cities. I think that Nash was the largest. But I'll ask about, what the protocol is for how they're going to factor in legal review maybe the assumption is just for city councils and towns to approve, they would just by default have their legal group, review them
Right.
before they would sign off on them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I just would hate for our legal department to come back and say, we have a problem with this line later.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
Yeah.
yeah.
And we've reviewed everything else that's been a commitment we've entered with CPCNH. The joint powers agreement
Went through legal.
went through
right.
legal.
Yeah, yep.
Um,
The legal group that's supporting CPCNH is super impressive. They're based in DC.
Is Duncan Weinberg?
Yeah. And
Is Natalie involved?
it's Michael Postar. He's one of their partners. He's the main guy.
Good.
But he's working extensively with CPCNH
Okay.
almost on a daily basis right now.
They're good for.
Because in
Ben-
addition to that, just quickly, all the contracts for Ascend Analytics, Calpine Energy Solutions, and the contract with CENH, those are probably 90% done at this point. And they're, the master agreements and the statements of work, and these contracts need to be kind of integrated to make sure because the different entities are supporting one another. So those are very close to completion. But those entities, as mentioned at council today, all those entities are full steam ahead working for us, so they're not waiting for the contracts to get finalized. Their project plan is loaded, and these groups are working on a day-to-day basis right now to get ready for launch, even though the contracts aren't finalized.
Yeah.
Because I think they're just, totally confident they're going to get over the goal line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we just have to recognize the time you're putting in and the good work you're doing on the risk committee, the CEO search committee, and what was your third one? Oh, you're.
I'm working on the Calpine contract.
Calpine
Because that's kind of the
contract,
retail
yeah.
customer services, and I have
Right.
it's a little bit of background there.
Right. So, great.
It's all good. It keeps, I think for us in the city, it's good to stay connected to what they're doing. There's a lot of moving parts. But I just continue to be super impressed by the consultants that they're working with, and the vendors that they're contracting with, and the consultants that are supporting it. Samuel Golding and Henry's does a great job. But so, I think I have a high degree of confidence in just the professionalism of what this group is doing.
Right. And they've done it at other places, too.
Yeah, but just the depth and the due diligence that is going on is, the rubble hit the road in terms of when they go out to the market and see what the prices look like. But absent that, everything is, I think, coming together pretty well.
Yeah. It's exciting. It's exciting. Questions for Kevin on that? On the risk management policy and the cost-sharing plan? I mean, my takeaway from the cost-sharing plan was there's going to be slivers in the rate for each of those shared services and overhead, and that's not a surprise. We knew that there'd be no money up front, that this would all be taken out of the billing charge, and it's going to be allocated based on our percent of the load at this point.
Yeah, there's different allocation methodologies depending on what the cost is. The other two things that they have not gone out to, they've gone out to one for accounting services, so they're going to be hiring an accounting firm and then an auditing firm.
Yeah.
So, there's going to be obviously a separate organization that's going to be handling all the numbers and handling the costs, sharing back to the communities.
Right.
And then there'll be an independent auditing firm on that as well. And those groups have not been identified yet. Right now, they're just kind of setting up the process, but then there's going to be two other firms that they hire that are actually going to be administering it all.
Right.
Independently. Yeah.
Great.
Okay, net metering. For those of you who have plowed through the aggregation plan to the net metering section and appendices, there's a description of how CPC&H wants to handle that. And I asked Ben for some help so we could understand it and what the policy implications are for us.
Great, well, thanks. Yeah, Councilor Tabor asked me to review the section of the plan that talks about the intent for the power plant to treat net metering. Also included some background around New Hampshire's policies and regulations, and some of the choices and considerations and additional statistics around how net metering could be advanced through community power. So if you wouldn't mind advancing to the next, just wanted to start off by offering up some basics in case anyone is not as familiar with net metering. but generally speaking, we're talking about solar photovoltaic resources. These are solar panels, on your house. Maybe they're separate, on an array, on some structure, on your property, et cetera. And folks that have solar panels don't have to participate in net metering, but a lot of them do because there are good benefits associated with doing so. And so we're talking about the subset of customers at large that have solar panels that participate in net metering. And they participate in a program with their utility. And in our state, most of the time, we're talking about Eversource. The way that net metering works, generally speaking, is that when you generate power locally, it in effect serves to run your meter backwards with the utility. That's where the word net metering came from, or the concept came from. And sometimes, and the trend more recently has been many times, not just sometimes, but historically it was meant to just offset your usage. You would size your facility to be roughly commensurate with your personal consumption. And now the trend is to have bigger and bigger solar facilities that are perhaps bigger than your individual usage. And to go even further, we have this idea called group net metering, where instead of maybe it's just one house with solar panels on top, we're talking about a separate facility that's relatively large when it comes to solar photovoltaic, and you can band together as a group of customers and have the facility that's relatively large offset everyone in the group's consumption. And there's this thing called a renewable energy certificate. When you generate power with your solar array, you generate a megawatt hour of electricity over a long period of time, because these are small facilities, but with 1 megawatt hour, there's also one attribute or certificate, and that can be sold separately. And in New Hampshire, everyone gets to keep ownership to the rights to sell those attributes on their own. Those are not part of the net metering program. And if we could go to the next slide, now that we've talked about just some basics, the state, about 5 years ago, changed its approach. I think when the program first started, the program provided full compensation, if you will. Everything that's in your full retail rate, not just the supply, but your transmission, distribution, stranded costs, regulatory costs, system benefits, the whole kit and caboodle. And then after some time, that program was adjusted so that you still get your supply component back if you have net excess generation or net surplus generation. But the incentive around some of the components of the transmission and distribution portion of the bill, those don't come back to you anymore under the newer version, the net metering 2.0, if you will. And that's true for, to me, they're very small, but 100 kilowatts, that would be enormous for a house. But trying to make a distinction between 100 kilowatts as the threshold for receiving this kind of treatment. Everything below that threshold is what I've talked about. If you're above 100 kilowatts, but below 1,000 kilowatts or a megawatt, you're not getting any piece of the T&D portion of your bill back. You're just getting the supply component. And
Just
you
a
can,
question on that.
Yep.
I mean, part of that change was because in the earlier programs, you had customers that weren't so-called adequately contributing to the cost of the distribution system. They were kind of getting a free ride in terms of that the reimbursement they were getting for all the other items beyond supply, they weren't contributing to the cost of the distribution system adequately.
That's one perspective that's certainly part of the consideration there. I think that there are some interesting issues around the Federal Power Act and sales for resale, and if you're going to
Okay.
sell power again, who has the ability to set the rate? In
Okay.
theory, if you're selling power for resale, that's a wholesale rate subject to federal jurisdiction.
Yeah, okay.
And there's a carve-out under federal law for PURPA, or, certain qualified facilities. Historically, it was combined heat and power. it became other things. That has an avoided cost, and there's these long, detailed proceedings around what avoided cost means. But you're right, some people believe that if you get the whole entire retail rate back, that is a very generous policy, and there are some folks that don't have solar, that pay their retail rates, and whether they are receiving the full benefits of that arrangement or not has certainly been part of the conversation. There are others, I don't know if it's, worth opening up that, again, it was 5 years ago in New Hampshire, but I think the idea is that there are some customers that had a raise before 2017, and they're under the net metering 1.0 program that's a little more generous in terms of the compensation, and we'll talk about settlement on the next slide, because I think the settlement piece is really what's truly relevant to the conversation in the community plan.
Ben, can I just add
Yeah, of
to
course.
your comment, because just to complement the pro and con on both sides, some have argued, I think sensibly, that when you're providing net meter power into the distribution grid, it requires the utility to have to bring less energy through its distribution and the transmission grid. And the transmission grid is something based on the usage in the entire, let's say New Hampshire, for example, each state. So if you can reduce the need to go through the transmission grid as much, it reduces the transmission costs for everybody as a customer. Regardless of whether you have net metering or not, you get a benefit from that reduction, which you're not contributing to, but somebody is.
Yeah.
So that was one of the discussions, how is that being compensated when that happens? I mean, right now, when you have small amounts, it doesn't make that much difference, but the minute you get more and more, there will be a bigger impact. And the neighboring states around us, like Vermont, Massachusetts, others, have demonstrated that they can push down their transmission costs. And if we don't, New England distributes the transmission costs to each state based on their total consumption. So if those guys are reducing their total consumption, we're not. We're paying a bigger percentage than we used to. Let's say, I think we're paying maybe at 1% more than they are because, for the equivalent amount.
Yep.
Because we're not reducing it as much. And the reduction happens because of these net metering customers, essentially. So there's a back and forth, and that's not to even get into the ancillary benefits of, renewable energy as such, health, quality, environment, all that other stuff, which is not at all compensated in any way. So, but that's another story. Okay, thanks.
And I agree with all of that, and that historically has been true when the systems were sized commensurate with the consumption.
Yep.
But when you oversize them, and they're 5 to 10 times what your house consumes,
Yep.
we're now having to rebuild the distribution system all over the region to accommodate backwards flows and pushing power back up onto the grid. So you're right, if you can offset your consumption at the time of the system peak,
Yep.
you pay a smaller percentage of the annual transmission bill. You're absolutely right, but it gets complicated quickly.
And incidentally, since I have solar collectors, I'm doing this, and I have my own spreadsheet to see what's going on. I generate maybe 50% of my need based on what I have. But then you got to remember, during the day, when I'm actually generating something and consuming it at the same time, if I look at just that, I'm only consuming 30% of my energy directly during the day. And at nighttime, of course, I have to get energy from somewhere, from the grid. And so unless you have some way of storing it, so I could use it at nighttime,
You need one
I
of
have to buy
one of these batteries that we're going to be offering.
That's kind of what I'm getting at. So that's where the battery would come in. If I can store my excess energy that I have, instead of putting it into the grid in my own battery, now I can offset my nighttime consumption when the sun's down or when it's raining or something. So, anyway.
And about 5 years ago, the state changed its incentive program. And when we get to the next slide, please, there's also the treatment of your net surplus or net excess generation. Historically, you racked up credit in terms of kilowatt hours. Maybe you'd whittle into them later on when you had some consumption at another point in time, but they just kind of rolled over into the future. And at the end of the year, just to clear the books and start fresh, they would cut you a check if you wanted to. Not at the greatest rate. Other states had done other things, but on safe legal ground, they would cut you a check once a year, and that has effects on other things like the state RPS program, because that has an impact on how much the utility is required to buy in terms of RECs. The new approach is to, instead of rolling that kilowatt hour, that balance forward, now at the end of the month, they're going to cash you out at the prevailing rate. And because they've cashed you out maybe a little more frequently, you're less likely to, at the end of the year, kind of have almost, we're clean and that's good. So it may have tax implications. It may have implications associated with how many RECs the utility is supposed to buy. And so these are potential impacts associated with the program that, as we go to the next slide, proposes to treat the settlement as if we were under the original or net metering 1.0 approach. It's unclear exactly what they plan to do for the compensation piece of things, but as I read it, and sorry for the eye chart there, but I wanted to use the exact words from the plan. As I read it, the transmission and distribution stuff that kind of changed from one program to another, it sounds like maybe the plan is to leave that alone, I think. But on the supply side of the bill, which just, regardless of your size, you're still going to get that back. If you potentially have one rate under the net metering, and then Portsmouth Community Power has a different supply rate, there may be a difference in how much one could be compensated for net surplus generation. And to the extent that Community Power wants to be as generous as the other program, the existing state utility program, there may be some additional costs to consumers to make that incentive at the level that it had historically been or could be under an alternative. In terms of the settlement, I think the plan is to potentially provide an additional bill so that the folks that want to separately keep track of what their net surplus generation is, they can do that, and maybe that's advantageous for their tax purposes. But importantly, they said that when the exact treatment is going to be set, it'll be duly noticed at a public meeting and fully disclosed so that everyone knows. But generally speaking, they're intending to promote things like group net metering, advocate on behalf of net metering programs at the state level, and to do other things that are, generally in line with the values that we've espoused in this program. So generally speaking, I think that the terms of net metering that are contained in the draft plan are reasonable. I just wanted to elevate to the community that to the extent that there is some kind of additional compensation above and beyond or different from and/or settlement treatment that's different from normal settlement treatment that you get from the utility, those may have impacts that we will want to keep an eye on.
Right. Ben, just a question, because I'm not sure if it's what you're getting at or is it just something different, but you mentioned that they're looking at maybe separately providing a separate billing for the net metering component. Every time our committee has heard from any kind of proposals where the utilities had to make some kind of changes on their billing, they always said, oh my gosh, this is very expensive to make these changes. It's a lot of costs. So I'm wondering whether those kind of changes on the billing have a big financial impact or bigger than we think, as not being a small trivial thing, or is that a significant cost if they would have to do that, break it out separately?
The way I read the draft plan provisions is that it's not necessarily the utility that would be providing the additional bill. It could be Community Power
I see, okay.
that could be providing the additional bill to provide the additional records.
Okay,
Calpine
okay.
Energy Solution, there's
All right.
provisions for them.
Okay.
Most billing will be rate ready. You know, we set our rates as a community power aggregator. That rate goes to, in our case, Eversource to calculate the bill. So it's just, we're giving them the rates. But my understanding is on the net metering that we're going to have capability to do dual billing, and that Calpine will handle that second billing statement for the customer. The one, and this is very helpful, Clifton Below, he loves to talk about net metering. And he knows, but he's very, like, to the minute detail, familiar with how it's supposed to be handled going forward. So if at a future meeting, if we wanted to dial him in for a few minutes.
Just give it a few minutes.
But this, the use of the old 1.0 formula would then be very deliberate on his part. I mean,
Potentially.
yeah.
It was more generous in the current regime.
But, well, so what I hear you saying is, one, that means that that cost has to be spread amongst all the users,
There is a potential for incremental costs that would need to be allocated proportionally, yeah.
right? But two, these would be bigger incentives to put your own solar array in
Yes, it would.
in line with
it
our
would
policy goals.
Yes. That's the trade-off.
Right.
And then there's the incidental effect on the statewide RPS market.
Mhm.
If we treat things as they were under net metering 1.0, in theory, maybe in the aggregate, the utility has to buy fewer RECs from the market, which therefore has a lowering of the price impact for folks that want to sell them and pick up the money. So we're going to make the program participation compensation more generous, but maybe have an ancillary, small diminution effect on what your REC value
Right.
is. So some trade-offs.
Yeah.
And incidentally, those RECs that you generate, let's say here in New Hampshire, they're often sold in other states because the price that you get for a generated REC is different in Connecticut than you get in New Hampshire. So what most people do is they sign up with an aggregator and someone who sells your RECs in the best possible price market
Right.
in New England.
It's definitely something to keep an eye on. I mean, for myself, I like the fact that we're doing the maximum incentive for people to create more renewable power and put that into the supply, which advances us on our city policy goal of getting to a net zero community someday, way down the road. But, if we're looking at every action that we can take to get off of carbon-based electricity, this would incentivize it, and we just have to see how the distortions work from that.
And if they're relatively minor and can be spread wide,
Yeah.
maybe that's, something that is okay, given that it's consistent with our objectives.
Right. Right.
I would say it would be a good problem to have if we had so many people decide to put solar on their homes and go into net metering that we had to rethink the plan because of the cost increases to others. Yeah, that would be a positive thing, because that would mean we had a lot of people using solar.
Well,
Agreed.
maybe it's a good timer right now because there is lots of money coming from Washington for these kind of things.
Right.
So this might be good timing for people to make use of those rebates and credits and whatever they're gonna get from the federal government.
And I also think it's an incentive for communities to join the coalition. You know, if you're a solar
Yeah.
panel
Yeah.
homeowner
Yeah.
and you say, boy, this is a much more favorable way to treat my
Yeah.
net metering, I want my city or town to be part of CPCNH. Um,
But it probably wouldn't hurt, though, at a future meeting, maybe to carve out 15 or 20 minutes and dial Clifton in just to,
Clifton, yeah.
and for we, you know, kind of supplement what Ben just went over and allow us to ask some questions of him.
Yeah, I think, and that's good.
Meter for dummies.
Right.
Well, that's good for the coalition too, because, you know,
He's just.
it'd be good to have all
Takes
those
out pretty
ideas
quick.
tested and, you know, have some engagement on them. I think that'd be good.
That was good, Ben.
Thank you, Ben, that's
Sure.
great. Learned a lot. Timeline review. Let's see. Kevin, it sounds like CPCNH is really starting to hit their milestones. Are they from your observation, on schedule for the first wave?
Yeah, it's tough to, they're still early on, but it's all coming together and that they have the broad dates that they know they have to hit. I think there's a lot of scrambling right now to get the week-to-week schedule going now that these vendors have been brought on board.
Right.
So, you know, I don't think anybody is saying that the schedule's kind of a layup.
Mhm.
I think there's a sense of urgency,
Right.
but there's also, I think, equal sense of activity
Right.
that's taking place.
Yep.
So,
It's a big undertaking.
Mm.
And I'm glad we're in the second wave.
yeah, no, I think it's a good place to be.
A fast follower, as you said.
Fast forward, yeah.
That was a good line. Could we call up the timeline, Stephanie?
I think so.
In the packet.
Let's see. It's,
Last.
is it the
Front
last
packet.
item?
Yeah, so.
So if you just go back to September, we have an open, with the, address the open questions with the Eversource data. But that was with Peter and Kate's. They were kind of requesting it, I think, through more of a, initially for other purposes for the use of the city. And now we're going to do a reset with what's going out on Friday.
Right.
To the Eversource to get more granular information, and we'll get that, and then we need to
Right.
get that
Right.
kind of.
Get that into our
get it
aggregation
summarized and
plan.
really understand what our load data profile is.
Yeah.
So that's kind of an ongoing open issue, but I'm confident once we get this next request out to Eversource, we'll get the data back that we need,
Right.
so.
So Stephanie, yeah, let's stay in touch with Peter so we
Mhm.
make sure.
Do that first thing tomorrow.
The aggregation plan needs the policy addendum or attachment done. I've drafted that, but it's really a repeat of what we've said in our goal section where we cite the two city policies that are really applicable here. One is the energy policy from 2018 to be net zero, and the second is the report from the committee that you were on that committee that included recommendations of more renewable power generation that the city could do and joining an aggregation. So that's an element that will fall in. We've got our history of our committee attachment done, and you've enlightened us on the net metering language. There's an addendum around that. You know, we could take that up later, but I don't hear any discussion about changing that language at all. I mean, it's,
I mean, that's the standard language that's in
Right.
the AP for all the communities, right?
right. So essentially, that gives us the draft, and then it goes
Yeah.
back to the coalition.
Yeah, since it's probably going to be some number of weeks before we get the data back from Eversource, you perhaps could send it along, just with the caveat to Henry that we're going to update the chart that has all the load data once we get it,
Right.
just to kind of get their review going in parallel.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sure. I think at some point, we want to get a draft into the council's hands prior to the public hearings. That may be tricky if there's a 6, 8, or 4 to 6 week wait for that data. We might have to have the council draft not have that data in it. I don't know.
I think Peter has data that came back already. It is from his other request.
Okay.
And I think he was working with Henry to kind of clean that up.
Okay.
So,
So we're close.
yeah.
Yeah. And we talked about the engagement. The contracts are in process with Coalition. When we get into December, we'll meet on the 8th, and we'll look at the public hearings and the information session to precede those.
Just a thought, Counselor, for those public hearings, we might want to try to get perhaps a Henry Herndon to.
Absolutely.
On his calendar, so he's available.
Okay.
You know, whatever dates we end up, set those dates earlier, sooner rather than later, and make sure we get on his calendar.
Right. We don't have the city council calendar yet. So as soon as we have that, we'll fill in appropriate dates. Yes, Ben?
Counselor Tabor, did we, I think you might have cruised past in October, the CPA update? What is that one? City Council CPA update, is that an accountant that's going to review the EAP? or
Computer,
is that-
community power aggregation,
Our aggregation.
just update on the initiative.
Oh, Joe, just updating the okay, the City
Aggregation.
Council.
Right, and I did that.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah.
That must be why you went past it.
Yes.
I didn't know if we needed, Ernst and Young or something.
No.
Counselor Tabor does a really good job of keeping us well-informed.
Right. And I'm already on one audit committee. I don't want-
Thank you.
And I will ask Henry what the format is for these public hearings. I don't know if we have that yet, do we? Or did
Well,
he
I
give us
think-
something?
I think the first one, you'd want a presentation.
Yeah. I mean, I think he's been through a bunch of these, so there
Right.
must be a kind of a template approach to how they are run.
Yeah, I think you'd want to explain it. And then have public hearing number 1, and then have public hearing number 2.
Yeah, I'll check with Henry on
And I
what that is.
think I have a note on our communications plan, and he was here for that meeting, that he has packaged presentations. I have a note that says,
Yeah, yeah.
Henry slides.
Yep.
Yeah, and we've got December to talk about that. So.
And we've talked that Clean Energy New Hampshire now is being onboarded to be supporting and the coalition with all the member outreach, et cetera, et cetera. So I imagine there would probably be a representative from CENH at our public hearing as well.
Right.
That's kind of a role they're starting to take.
Okay. So I think our key paths we're walking down are finishing the aggregation plan language, getting it to CPCNH, getting that utility data. That's all the aggregation plan. And then our survey and information session and public hearings. Those two big programs of work. Public comment. Do we have any?
We do not.
Okay. Just around the table, any last thoughts at this point as the pace is picking up? What we need to do to be successful?
At the public meeting, if you feel that it would be useful to have someone from the utility come and talk about what it does and doesn't mean, or any questions around why
Yep.
people are getting enormous bills right now, let me know, I can relay that.
Okay.
Yep.
And the second thing is, you had mentioned how much work Kevin is doing with the coalition, and so I just wanted to say thank you, Kevin, for all the work
Yeah,
and time that you're
absolutely.
Here, here.
Yeah,
Yes,
thank you.
Appreciate it.
definitely, thank you.
Thanks. It's
I
fun.
think it was probably every day last week.
Yeah.
You had a,
I think your beard has grown.
I had red hair when this thing started.
so is,
Just one other thing I didn't
Yes.
mention, just for the group, is they're hopefully by next week bringing on an executive search firm to begin the process for a CEO. So that's going to go to the board on the 17th. We've been interviewing firms over the past couple weeks, big national firms, and have a firm ready to be proposed, and then they'll start the executive search with the goal of having a CEO on board for this organization, later or by springtime.
would it make sense, just to follow up on our discussion of net metering, to have Cliff Bealow zoom in either December or January? Continue that discussion.
Yeah, in December.
Yeah, okay.
I can mention it to him.
Okay,
Yep.
I think that'd be helpful to confirm our understanding of it.
yeah. Okay.
Maybe try and see if we can get a preliminary sense of what the magnitude of some of these impacts might be.
Right, right.
So mechanics and
Mhm.
potential impact.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's a sanity check.
As well as just any general questions of him relative to the coalition in terms of,
right.
he's happy to talk about it.
Okay. A last question to each of you. Just go around, what do you think we need to do to be successful at this point? Council?
Just public outreach, lots and lots of public outreach at this stage. And, I think it becomes more difficult after December, because people have a tendency to go away or hibernate in the winter and not show up
Yes.
at public meetings. So it's going to be very hard. That hearing in January is going to be really tough if we don't get the word out in December and we're not adamant about it.
Right, and we need those hearings to be Zoom-enabled for all the snowbirds.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the public hearings are necessary for us to file the EAP, but then we also have the luxury then of still some more time between then and when we, as the city, go live to continue education,
Right.
all right? So, yeah, I agree, education is the big part, but
Right.
we're going to have an opportunity to continue to chip away at it, over
Yeah.
the first half of next year,
Yeah.
before we hopefully have our countdown to start our launch.
Right. Yeah, and, you know, I actually pondered, would it be more valuable to have the survey closer to our launch? But I think there is an opportunity to have some kind of every home information sent out that would include the survey results and reinforce with some description of where we've been and what's ahead or something like that.
I agree that public outreach is critical for success, and the way I had been thinking about it was that once we can survey the community and find out preferences, we would take that information back and try to develop a menu of different services or rates that we would offer.
Right.
And my thought would be to put those out for notice and comment. And maybe we further refine them through a subsequent round of survey or whatever public
Right.
engagement to further refine on things so that we can just, enhance our offerings to maximize our chance of success.
Good idea. Yeah. Peter?
I totally agree with both Counselor Cook and Ben that outreach is the key there. And I think maybe with the winter months where people might not be getting out as much, maybe an opportunity would be to try to get in with these local organizations, whether it's the Rotary Club or something, when they have some event where one of us could give a brief presentation as a reminder to everybody, that's already coming to the event, specifically for some other reason, to get that information out. The more we do that in different organizations that we belong to or would be invited to, the better.
Sure.
Because people are going to be indoors, and that's a good time to bring their attention to these things.
Great.
This is going to sound like a kind of a crazy idea, but it's one way to get information out easily to residents, at least residents with children. If you send a piece of paper home with kids from school that says, hey, check out this new initiative from the city. It's funny how these things happen. Almost all the schools have like a folder for
Yep.
kids that go home once a week with handouts from activities and things. We talk about the cost of getting news out, but you could ask the high school eco club to stuff folders in the elementary schools and the middle schools to send out information
Yeah.
to parents and
No, that's a great
people in the
channel.
community.
I've used that in the past.
Yeah.
We used it for Portsmouth Listens, and it got a lot of uptake.
Yeah, it's amazing though. People pay attention to that.
Right.
Whereas they might not look in their bill, they might not necessarily look in their mail.
Right.
I just had one, on the website, do we put links to like articles, relevant articles, like the editorials, your opinion pieces?
That'd be great. That'd be great.
The Union Leader article, the New Hampshire Business Review. If we start to have, a section in there that
Yeah.
is educational, any of the
Educational
relevant
resources.
I think you
pieces
could
that
have a
were-
whole, community power in the news page.
Computing power in the news, yeah. Just so, for those kind of geeks out there that are interested in really studying this, they can go out and take a look at it,
And for that matter, whatever Don Crease has said about it, as the state's
Yeah.
community advocate, knowing that there's someone that doesn't have a dog in the fight, that has looked at this very closely and thinks it's a good idea, may be a beneficial thing to get out there.
Yeah, he has a column that he wrote, or I guess he's got a blog.
In-depth New Hampshire.
In depth, yeah. And it's very well written. He's
But
got
the
a
more
lot
we
of
kind of cobble those all together and kind of get them
Yep.
on our website, I think it'd be
right.
helpful.
What about maybe some kind of a contest at the schools for young people to imagine a renewable energy future for Portsmouth and what we could do in our town, including all the renewable energy things that are available, whether it's wind or solar or whatever, just to kind of, like we were saying, when the kids get involved, the parents get involved automatically whether they want to or not. So maybe this is not a bad way to, maybe some kind of a contest with some kind of prize or something, I don't know.
It's definitely worth considering.
Yeah, and I'm overdue for my meeting with the Eco Club, so
Oh, yeah.
that's,
Perfect.
yeah, I
What
could,
was that memo that the students did to the council?
Oh,
What was
that's-
that on?
When they're in the middle school, there's a teacher, a particular science teacher, that assigns a renewables project each year. And so the students come up with an idea around new renewable energy. And then he takes the best ideas and he sends them to the city council. And the city council referred them to the sustainability committee, who sit down and reviewed every single proposal and invited the teacher and students in to present them to sustainability. It was a great opportunity for those students to come in and present, but it was also a great opportunity then for the high schoolers who sit on the sustainability committee, Eco Club, to recruit the middle schoolers into the high school club, and to kind of continue their service and their
Yeah.
thought in that area. But it's, sometimes those little things
yeah, no,
just
that
have a
was,
huge impact, and
they had some good ideas. They had some wild ideas that no adult would ever think of. Like, no, they were great, like floating solar panels on the mill pond.
yeah.
Not a bad idea.
And we'd all think of all the reasons it can't be done, but,
Yeah.
so,
But they were very focused on solar, and it's funny because the sustainability committee has picked that up
yeah,
and started talking more seriously about things like solar over parking lots and
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
kind of those kinds of projects.
yeah. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Recording stopped.